Этот подкаст создан канадским клубом бесед у камина.
Hello, and welcome to Canada as I see it. Hello, and welcome to this week's podcast. I would like to thank Vladimir again for introducing the podcast. You may recall he did so in English a couple of weeks ago, but today he did it in Russian. Thank you, Vladimir. You can also thank him for today's subject matter. He wanted to know a bit more about Ontario. And well, y'all know me. I don't do anything in halves. So here we go. Let's start with population. There are estimates that range from 13.9 to almost 16 million. But I'm going to go high side. I'm picking 15.911 million because, well, size does matter. Ontario is also Canada's second largest province, 1 million square kilometers, versus Quebec, which is 1.668 million square kilometers. Canada's capital is Ottawa, and that's located on the Ottawa River, on the border with Quebec, and it was chosen over the original choice of Toronto, which is now Ontario's capital, because, well, Toronto, previously known as York and Toronto, it was too close to the U.S. border, and, well, it kept getting attacked by the Americans. The one attack that really struck home, as it were, was on April 27th, 1813, when the Americans captured and burned York. When the Brits realized that they were outmanned, they essentially set the fort to self-destruct, destroying the weapons magazine to avoid it from falling into American hands. Well, the Americans took to burning the rest of the town, but unfortunately the damage on both sides had been done. Many Americans were wounded due to the explosion, and when a storm came up a couple of weeks later, it pinned them between their ships in the harbor and the hostile British population. So they abandoned the site. Retaliation was swift, well, for being 210 years ago, due to the fact that many women and children were killed during the incursion. The British wanted to teach the Americans a lesson, effectively saying, you should act like gentlemen and don't involve civilians. So, by request from the Canadian governor, British troops from Bermuda moved on Washington, D.C., and burned the White House down on August 14th, 1814. And that's today's tangent. And, well, really, it's close enough to being today's historical fact. So let's go back to Ontario. 40% of Canada's population lives here. And of that, 90% of them live within 200 kilometers of the U.S. border. And, well, if you have to commute downtown from the West End, you'll think that 90% of that lives south of Highway 401 in Toronto. And there's that number again. 40% of people who actually immigrate to Canada choose Ontario. And, again, many settle in what is known as the GTA, the Greater Toronto Area. The broader sense, it's the Golden Horseshoe. And that's if you include Oshawa to the east and Hamilton and St. Catharines to the south. This is reflected in the festivals and the food that's available in Toronto. This weekend, actually, it is the Caribbean Carnival. And this is typically celebrated on the Simcoe Day weekend. Yeah, I just realized I'm sort of going at this in a bit of a scrambled day because I usually start with the date and here's all the facts, blah, blah. Well, Today is August the 4th, and tomorrow, the 5th, is what is known in Ontario as Simcoe Day. It's a public holiday, and it's derived from John Graves Simcoe, who was the first Lieutenant Governor of Upper Canada, and he founded Toronto, then known as York, in 1793. Toronto named the first Monday in August holiday Simcoe Day, starting in 1969. And that makes this the 55th anniversary of the holiday. So, on to geography, and I can thank my high school geography teacher, Mrs. Henry, for my interest in this subject. Much of Ontario is actually wilderness. It's a whole lot of nothing. And there's a line that marks this, and the division is known as the Canadian Shield. It's actually seen as the nucleus of the North American continent. It runs from Newfoundland and Labrador north to the upper reaches of Nunavut, and then west to Alberta. Well, in Ontario, everything south of the Shield is fertile farmland, and everything north of it is grassy lowlands. Oh, another thing about Ontario, to give you an idea of how large it is bigger, actually, than a lot of countries. It's 3 times the size of Germany. It's 78% larger than Ukraine. And if you were to start from Toronto and drive to Rainy River, that's the westernmost point in the province. It's actually in the central time zone, a different time zone. That's how large Ontario is. It would take you almost 19 hours to drive there. By comparison, every couple of years or so, we drive south to visit Walt Disney World in Florida. And it takes 19 hours. Another one. I'm going down to my daughter's wedding next month. And that's in Wyoming. And go ahead. Guess how long that'll take. Yeah, 19 hours. So that's how, actually it's a bit more. I just wanted to make a point. That shows you how much space Ontario takes up. Caroline and I did take an Ontario trip 10 years ago to visit what was then the brand new Polar Bear Habitat Rehabilitation Center in Cochrane, Ontario. I've spoken about this before. We started out at 7 in the morning at the shore of Lake Ontario and drove north and arrived in Cochrane that evening at 5:15 p.m. Okay, another tangent coming up, just warning you. From there, well, we settled in Cochrane. We stayed a few days. But from there, we took a train to Moosonee, and that's actually the Polar Bear Express. It takes about 4.5 hours. Seriously, if you get the chance, take it. That actually passes the northernmost road in Fraserville, Ontario. Anything further north from there, well, you got to fly. So we get to Moosonee, and from there, we took a canoe to the settlement of Moose Factory on the shores of James Bay. Now, here's the tangent. This week at work, I was given the task of digitizing a 1/4-inch audio tape, those open reel ones that always seem to be playing jazz music in TV shows and movies. Well, this one was an interview, and it was of a woman from Moose Factory. And really, all that happened organically. I didn't do this weekend because of that. It just happened. A couple of other things I wanted to tell you about and play, really, because it's music. I cannot, due to licensing concerns. Maybe one day I'll start my own radio station and pay the damn fees, but I can tell you about them. Ontario has been advertised so wonderfully through the years. It's very easy to sell Ontario. the beauty, the culture, the food, the people. My memories of the province advertising itself began in 1967. There was a movie that was produced for the province to help celebrate Canada's centennial, and it's called A Place to Stand. You can find it on YouTube. I'll link it. Now, this is the movie. There is a soundtrack on there, but I'm speaking of the movie, and you really have to see it. I'll link it on my Podbean page and through Facebook, and hopefully you'll see the link. But the soundtrack of this movie was written by a woman named Dolores Clayman. And she just happens to be the same person who wrote the all too familiar Hockey Night in Canada theme that we all listen to every Saturday night from October through to, well, June, but that doesn't really happen too often in Toronto, does it? So anyway, rather than try to sing the entire song, I'll just recite the first verse, and you may recognize it. Give us a place to stand and a place to grow, and call this land Ontario, a place to live for you and me, with hopes as high as the tallest tree. Give us a land of lakes and a land of snow, and we will build Ontario, a place to stand, a place to grow, Ontario. Okay, now that, for those of you who know the song, that worm is in your head, and you're welcome. The other thing about the movie, it actually only runs 18 minutes, is that a new method of projecting was created just for it. Filmmaker Christopher Chapman pioneered the concept of moving panes, images moving within the single frame of the screen. And at times there are 15 separate images moving all at once. This technique was dubbed multi-dynamic image technique, and it's been used in several movies since. It's you'll know it when you see it type of thing. Even today, actually, I'm in awe of the production, which the original is on 70mm film, and it premiered at the Expo 67 Ontario Pavilion in Montreal on April 28th, 1967. The other song is actually a commercial, courtesy of Ontario Tourism from 1984. And the tagline for the commercial is actually still on our vehicle license plates 40 years later. Again, I'll link one of the commercials for this. There were quite a few versions. I'll link them on Podbean and Facebook and such. Here we go. Start at the dawn of a new day, exploring the wide open road. Follow the trail where it's leading you and discover Ontario. You'll see the mist on the water and feel the sun shining strong. You'll find the smile of a friendly face that says this is where you belong. In Ontario, so get up and go. See Ontario, a wonder to know. 'Cause it's yours to discover, and you're going to love it so. So come on, everybody, get up and discover your Ontario. And that's Ontario. You'd think I was proud of it, eh? Well, I am. The time of the podcast should be one indicator. There's a lot more I could talk about, actually, but I should probably give you a break to grab a bite to eat. And, well, me too. I'm off to check out something that will definitely show up on a future episode of the podcast. Thank you all so very much for listening, and I will talk to you again next week. And that's a part of Canada as I see it. It is written and produced by me, James Warple, and brought to life by the Fireside Chat Club of Canada. Our theme song is Night Owls by Braden Deal. If you have any questions or comments, please email me at asiseeit@warple.ca. Join us every Sunday for another episode of Canada as I See It.